So I'm sitting here at Starbucks in Panther Creek doing this video really quickly. Promise it's going to be a short one. The first thing I want to remind you is that on Monday we learned how to take this, that is in vertex form, and put it in standard form. All I would do is I have -2 times the pattern, so I'm going to square the first. I'm going to multiply and double, and I'm going to square the last. I'm going to distribute that -2x squared, and I'm going to combine like terms. So what I just did was I took this from vertex form and brought it to standard form. What we want to learn how to do now is bring it from standard form to vertex form, and that is called completing the square. So here's something in standard form. How do I take it from standard form to vertex form? The first thing you want to do is you want to move your constant away from the x's. So I'm going to move this constant to this side. The second thing I want to do is I want to create a perfect square trinomial over here. Perfect square trinomial will give me a binomial squared. So in order to create a perfect square binomial, I'm going to take the b term and divide by 2. So if I take that b term and divide by 2, I get -4. I'm now going to square it, and that gives me 16. And that 16 ends up being the constant that I add right here that will create a perfect square trinomial. But remember, if I add it to this side, I must also add it to this side. Because I did what's called completing the square, I have created a perfect square trinomial. This will now factor into a binomial squared. I could actually factor this if I wanted to, split the middle and group, but what I know is that this -4 is what will fall right in here to create my binomial squared. So this -4 is going to drop right in there to create the binomial squared. Now all I do to complete it is add the 1, and this would be going from standard form to vertex form. Now I can see my vertex is 4, 1. From standard form, all I can see is that my y-intercept is 17. So let's review what we just did. The first thing we did was we moved the constant to the other side by bringing the 17 to the other side. The second thing we did, we took this b term, we divided it by 2, we got -4, and we squared it to get 16. And I added that to both sides, leaving me this. Now what I do is I create the binomial squared, and the binomial squared is created by this -4, which is b divided by 2, dropped in here, and square the whole binomial. And last, I bring this to the right side. So let's look at one of the more difficult ones, because we have a problem here in which the coefficient of x squared has to be 1, or I can't complete the square. So let's do the directions. The first step is to bring the constant to the other side. The second step is going to have to be to factor that 3 out. And when I do that, I always leave a blank here at the end. So here so far are the directions. If you don't know that this stands for leading coefficient, make sure you write yourself a note. So I moved the constant, I factored out the 3. I'm now going to do just what I did before. I'm going to take b divided by 2, negative 4 divided by 2 gives me negative 2, and I'm going to square it, giving me 4. And that 4 is going to be added right there. Remember, the directions said you have to add that to both sides. But the problem is, on this side, this 4 is in these parentheses. So what did I actually add to this side of the equation? If it's inside the parentheses, I actually added 12. So I need to make sure I add 12 over on this side. Again, this will create a binomial squared. So it's x, this sign comes down, and this number drops in. Notice the sign that comes down is because of the division. So this number drops in here, and then as a binomial squared, I move the constant back, and I have gone again from standard form to vertex form. So when I add to both sides, don't forget to make sure you add enough. You can't just add 4 here and here. 4 is inside the parentheses, so the 3 distributes to the 4, adding 12. Just real quickly, let's look at how we would solve from vertex form. Remember, solving is following the x-intercepts. I know x-intercepts y is 0, so I'm going to plug 0 in here. I'm going to add 11 to this side. I'm going to divide by 3. I'm going to take the square root of both sides. I'm going to add that to here. So my two solutions are x plus the square root of 11 thirds and x minus, and 2 minus the square root of 11 thirds. Now, just a repeat of geometry, not allowed to have a square root in the denominator. So to rationalize the denominator, I'm going to multiply by root 3 over root 3. And I know you did this in geometry last year. If I were to multiply across the top, this would be square root of 33. If I were to multiply across the bottom, this would be the square root of 9, which is 3. So my answer would be x equals 2 plus or minus the square root of 33 over 3. Now if I wanted to write them in intercepts, I'd have 2 plus the square root of 33 over 3, 0, and 2 minus the square root of 33 over 3, 0.